know with the analytics, going for two there and not getting these two at all. Whatever.
Yeah. Do you think Smith will be there for long?
If he finishes with a worse record than he had last year, I said he's got at least one more.
Yes.
That would be five. So
No.
he's got to.
That's like what they talked about mostly. It was like, oh, the fire analogy. It was like D'Antonio was like a big campfire, and then it was like a torch, and then like a little matchstick with.
I wish somebody told me those would have been the good old days.
I know, right?
Yeah, Lucy was like, did MSU used to be good? I was like, did they used to be good?
Yes.
10 years ago, they were. My brother-in-law texted me because Brian Kelly got fired. It's like, Brian Kelly to MSU? I'm like, oh, please no.
No. Yeah, no thanks.
No, thanks. He can,
No, we can stay.
he can
Or
go-
get away.
Stay
Yeah.
down in the SEC and
Yeah.
take in your Southern accent.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, then who do you?
Someone that's gonna win.
Kirk
We
Cousins
need.
get off the Falcons.
Yeah, actually, that's true. That would be great. I think they got like Magic lined up for this. Last summer, but
Magic is Magic. Magic's not too much younger.
I was gonna say he's pretty old, so.
And I don't think he's ever coached. He's like an
Well,
executive.
and Walker was at the game. So I'm like, can we just put Walker?
I know. He's got some eligibility up, right? How we doing, sir? Cheers.
Birthday today.
Oh, happy birthday, my man. October birthday. Just like yeah. It's the best month for you.
I think so. Yours too, or?
Yeah. It's a couple weeks ago. A lot of. It's great. It's great that I had a heritage class part. What do you do on your birthday? Oh, yeah.
This morning. Yep.
So there, the videos are.
The lights were on.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is I'll go around the audience.
Okay.
There's two. There's one on stage. Yes. I think it would be more. Yeah, I would.
And just like the multi-generational aspect of it, and they're all here today.
We're going with 3 chairs.
Broke down.
Whether we need it or not.
I love it.
Sweet.
Yeah. It gets to be too big.
Yeah.
I will introduce briefly.
Okay.
Say hello.
My
brain works.
And I'll invite you to tell me about yourself if you want. That's cool. Like I say over
On
15
staff?
years.
Well,
Been involved.
yeah, over 50, because we're 16 years old, and I was part of that first group as a community member.
She's been
So I've been
involved
volunteering
since
for.
With our football team.
Years 97, I saw, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's even longer than you.
Yeah, I was a mere student when I first started.
I graduated in 97.
Yeah, same. I was
Right.
98. So
Yeah.
I didn't mind. Yeah, I didn't.
TV.
Oh,
I caught it on
yeah.
TV,
I didn't-
which is great.
I knew
When
it.
it's on TV. I don't know where that came from.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so he was the about but you didn't have like
Last couple of years. Great.
those were
He was a runner too.
yeah.
Yeah. Ads are short. Yeah. The ads are really compared to.
Cool. What was your major?
Yeah.
I don't
So sick of
know.
that.
Media timeout.
Yes. Although Jim Skipper doesn't have I would think he played basketball. He's got a lot of he's all
But I
killed.
did work through your time for
Yeah.
Oh, Scott's my
Bob, we're like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, this is one
And then I
Oh,
assumed
yeah.
vividly the day that he came running into the office, like, James called, he's got the new Puerto Rican baby. They adopted Luke.
Oh, that was Luke.
Was Luke. Yeah. So I was in the office when they had
Yeah,
to go.
those are moments that like
Right?
find themselves in the memory.
Yeah, and it's,
Person
so
comes
now
into your
Luke's
life
working
for
here.
sure.
And I'm like, dude, I remember the day the phone rang. I was there. So it's pretty cool, like how those connections all play out. It really is pretty providential. So that's fun.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I'll mention to Scott that we tried.
Oh, totally. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you should open the doors.
Yeah, they're still going well. I'll check in with Ashley's kind of the boss. Otherwise, I would get too involved and I screw things up. Well, the professionals do that.
Morning.
I'm assuming he's the podium mic hot.
Oh, you're welcome. We're interested. We live in the. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, they put a rain garden in at our church too, yeah, recently. Yeah, that's good. You wanna go sit down someplace? I know, right? Now we're like, oh.
Good. See it right there?
Yeah.
I can give you a hand. Those things are sticky. We'll cheat. There we go. How about that?
Thank
Makes
you.
it a little easier.
Yes.
There. Now you're
There you
official.
go.
Now you're official.
You're smart to get your coffee and pastry first. That's right. Too. That's good. Enjoy the event. Name tag.
Oh, I bet I don't have one. Mike and Karen Skidema. Oh, we don't have a name
See,
tag.
that's okay. We've got one right here. That you
I just thought maybe you would
write your
have.
name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I bet I can do that.
Yes. Some blank ones for you. Hi, good morning. Yes. I can help you find it if you.
Okay, Nancy Burkike. I don't think that
Yes. There you go.
Hank found his.
I must have not signed up.
I didn't
thought
either.
had.
I didn't
That's
either.
okay, we're glad you're here.
I said, Mike and I aren't here because I didn't sign up.
Well,
I thought we would just be, that we would automatically be signed up because we're on the committee, but.
We're on,
Yeah.
I'm on the
Because
committee.
the last time we went to something, we had big whoopee-doo name
And
tags.
sometimes Jeff will bring like the
Yeah,
your
yeah,
official name
that-
tag.
I
that's-
have
yeah.
them in my pocket.
Oh, you do?
Oh,
Oh,
you're welcome to wear either. And
Yeah.
yes, we usually do
Oh,
bring
okay.
those. I think it was just
oh,
Monday
no.
morning, you know?
Believe me, I get that.
Yes. Hey, Drew.
Yeah. Well, see, here he is. Oh, you didn't sign up. Well, you so good. You got it.
Good morning. Can I find your name?
There I am.
Wonderful. I can help you get it. Are
That'd
you
be good.
Raj?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. There you go.
Thank you.
Oops. Sticky, isn't it?
It is.
Got some cookies and pastries there for you too. The women's is closed right before.
I'm not sure.
Right here in the right spot. What is your name? Gretchen Weaver. Okay, let's try to find your name tag. If not, we can. Happy you're here, friend. So you can help yourself to a pastry or coffee, and then we'll go right into the thanks for being here.
Are we going here?
Yeah, in the recital hall. Yep, I'll help. Okay, perfect. Yeah, Jeff's. Looks like everyone. Wow, we had. You get a prize if you sit in the front row.
What's the prize?
An extra pastry. yeah.
Pastry.
Okay, I think we are going to go ahead and get this show rolling here. So, good morning, everybody. Glad you're all here. If we have not met yet, my name is Jeff Hovernink, and I serve as the alumni director here at Calvin. So, really great to have the Heritage class out here this morning. We're excited to have one of our fall, we call it kind of our corner of campus panels. We do these pretty much every fall, where we kind of take a deeper dive into one segment of Calvin's entire, offering of programs, go a little bit deeper. So, just want to do a couple of housekeeping things. Hopefully you all enjoyed some coffee and some treats in the lobby this morning. They will still be out there when we're done. So we designed it to have a little bit of social time before and after. So you're welcome to go back and have some more of those. Also want to make sure that we do welcome. We've got probably 40 or 50 people that are signed up via the live stream. So good morning from Grand Rapids to everybody watching online from wherever you are in the world. We're grateful that you signed up. So we're excited to make these programs available to Heritage class members no matter where you live. So. And then lastly, we're going to hear a lovely program from Dave and Andrea here in a minute. We're going to do Q&A afterwards. So when we're done with the program, then Ashley's got a mic and we'll just pass it around for questions. So we'll do that after we're done. So, okay, let's talk about Plaster Creek Stewards. So this is a program that's been around for a bit, and it's a beautiful collaboration between university faculty, staff, and students who all get to work with local partners to help restore Plaster Creek. It began, the ideas anyway, probably 20 years ago, and you'll hear more in just a minute, but it has grown significantly in the last couple of decades. I have heard this presentation a year or so ago, maybe longer, to the alumni board, and it's fascinating. So that's why we were excited to bring it to all of you this morning. So it's kind of fun, right? As we've been talking about Plaster Creek, Bernie Walcher, I'm going to pick on Bernie. He's a part of the Heritage class leadership team, and as we were talking about this a few months ago, he's like, as a kid, like Plaster Creek was in our backyard. I used to play in it all the time. So for those that grew up in West Michigan, right, like this body of water has some special sentimental value. So grateful for our speakers today. So Dr. Dave Warners, he's the director of Plaster Creek Steward. Dave's a biology professor during the day, Plaster Creek Steward probably day and night. But he's been a part of Calvin as a faculty member since 1997. And then Andrea Lubberts, she is our program manager for Plaster Creek Stewards. Andrea's been involved with Plaster Creek for over 15 years. She'll tell you more about that. Both are Calvin grads, so it's fun to see them kind of here at their alma mater. So it'll be fun to hear from them. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Dave and Andrea, and we will learn a lot more about Plaster Creek. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. And thank you, everybody, for coming today. Some of you, I'm sure, know quite a bit about Plaster Creek Stewards already, but I think we've got some new information for anybody. I've been even informed of some new things putting this presentation together with Andrea. So we'll follow this approach. I want to situate this work in Reformed theology, which I feel is a really good fit. And then thinking about Plaster Creek and the watershed as our place being bigger than just the campus here at Calvin, but we are part of this watershed community. And then talk about some of the work that Plaster Creek Stewards has done at Calvin, as well as out in the watershed more broadly. And then close with some thoughts about how we all live in a watershed somewhere. So when we talk about Plaster Creek Stewards, we are an initiative of Calvin University. It's similar to the way the Calvin Prison Initiative is an initiative of Calvin University. So we are clearly under Calvin's umbrella, but we operate our own budget. I have my own staff, two of whom are here besides Andrea. So Haley and Betty are over there. So if you have questions afterwards, you want to ask someone other than Andrea and I, or if we're busy, then you can chat with Haley and Betty as well. So Julie Wildscott and myself are Calvin faculty, and as Calvin faculty, we're expected to do scholarship, and both Julie as an engineer and myself as a botanist and restoration ecologist, we focus our scholarship on the Plaster Creek watershed. Benji is half-time greenhouse manager with Plaster Creek Stewards, and he works the other half-time of his job with the Calvin Ecosystem Preserve. And then we have Jacob, who's full-time as well, and Lucas is our student relations coordinator. So he is our go-between between the student body, and he's a current student. and the work that we do in the community. All right, so creation care has a long-standing tradition in Reformed theology. And there's, I could probably present a whole talk just on this idea. But John Calvin has some wonderful quotes and teachings that have really resonated with me as an environmentalist and as a biologist over the years. This is one of the quotes I wanted to share with you as we start today. He says, consequently, we know the most perfect way of seeking God is, and that ... there, he goes on this long rant about it's not to try to intellectualize God and to figure out exactly who God is. He's saying there's a lot of mystery there, but he says the most perfect way of seeking God is for us to contemplate him in his works, whereby he renders himself near and familiar to us and in some manner communicates himself. There's lots of other images too. And in the Reformed tradition, we talk about the two books of God's revelation, the book of Scripture and the book of nature. And we can learn about God and be drawn close to God when we pay attention to both of those sources of revelation. Plaster Creek Stewards, it arose initially out of some service learning work that was being done in the early 2000s. So some of us faculty here at Calvin were trying to do more service learning with our students, getting our students out into the community, give them real world experiences. And a lot of that was happening under a rubric of place-based learning. So let's not just educate our students inside of a classroom, somehow removed from the rest of the world, but let's educate them in a broader place. And some of the questions that some of these faculty were asking in the early 2000s were things like, what impact does Calvin's campus have on the broader place within which we reside? And then another one, can we do education here at Calvin in ways that benefit the place where we exist? And that place being more than the campus, as I mentioned before. And this one too really caught my attention. Is Grand Rapids and the part of creation known as West Michigan grateful that Calvin is here? If you were to ask somebody who lives out in the community, are you really glad that Calvin's part of West Michigan and part of Grand Rapids? Or if you were to ask a fish in Plaster Creek, are you glad that Calvin is here? What would that fish say? What would that person say? Right? How can we do education here in a way that benefits this broader community? One of the things that, as a science faculty person engaged in some of these kinds of conversations and thinking about these questions, I was a part of a group that was paying attention to Whiskey Creek, which ironically is a creek that drains through Calvin's property. It starts in the ecosystem preserve over on the east side of the East Beltline, and it comes through our campus. It goes actually under the parking lot here, the Fine Arts Center, and then emerges just a little bit to the south, and then drains into the seminary pond. And then it goes underneath Burton Street and heads on out and eventually joins Plaster Creek. So as a science faculty, we started focusing on water. And we were asking the question, what is Calvin's impact on this little tributary? By the way, Whiskey Creek was named because back in the days of Prohibition, there were some illegal activities going on in the area which is now our preserve, which is quite ironic, and I just sort of love that. It feels kind of naughty, but in a good way. So Whiskey Creek drains through the campus here and goes underneath the Fine Arts Center. Right here's where we are, and then it heads on out, and it goes underneath Burton Street, and eventually will join Plaster Creek. So we're wondering, what impact does Calvin have on that water? And so we were measuring as it came into campus, the water as it went out of campus, and then we started learning more about Plaster Creek. And some of the things we learned about Plaster Creek were very concerning. Here is a watershed map of Plaster Creek. By the way, a watershed is just an area of land that drains to a common point. Right? So this is the shape of the Plaster Creek watershed. Calvin is situated right up in this area. And in fact, we straddle two watersheds. So a little bit of our campus flows to the north and ends up in Reeds Lake. That's our adjacent watershed. Most of the campus flows to the south and ends up in Plaster Creek. And by the way, I'm not sure if you were aware of this, but the old farm that was purchased to make our campus was the Knoll Crest Farm. Knoll Crest refers to the fact that there was a crest of land here that drained into two separate water, like a little miniature continental divide, all right? So that name itself indicates that we're at the precipice between two different watersheds. But here's the lay of the land. Here comes Whiskey Creek, right? And then it joins Plaster Creek. Plaster Creek headwaters is out this area to the south in areas like Dutton and Caledonia, a lot of agricultural land. And then it flows into more commercial, residential. And then as it's making its way towards the Grand River, more industrial areas down here and lower income neighborhoods. And then eventually joins the Grand River just south of downtown Grand Rapids. This is right by the sewage treatment plant off of Market Street. Historically, this land was forested, and indigenous people lived here. There's a group called the Anishinaabe, and a particular group of the Anishinaabe were the Ottawa. And when the Ottawa lived here, the land was forested, and the Ottawa had a very deep belief and understanding that their own health and well-being was tied to the well-being of the land. And they have a saying, we've been reminded of this many times from our friend Ron Yob, who is the chairman of the Grand River Bands of Ottawa Indians, that water is life. They knew how foundational healthy water was to their own well-being. And in fact, the women of the Ottawa tribe were commissioned with being water keepers. They made sure that the campsites were not situated too closely to the waterways where they would have a negative impact on that water. Women were commissioned to do that because women were the source of new life. They gave birth to new people, right? So the Ottawa took very seriously their responsibility to care for the water because they knew that their own well-being was intimately tied to the health and well-being of the local waterways. We had colonists come over, the descendants of which are most of us, right? And they had a very different understanding, especially those from Dutch ancestry, that water was something to be controlled, right? And they knew what to do with wet lands. You would drain them, you would channel them, and you would make that land fertile to use it for farmland. And a lot can be said about that, but it was a very different worldview and a very different understanding of water. And many of those activities that went along with urbanization, commercial development, with agricultural activities, the way we do agriculture here, the way we have our yards, the way we keep our lawns, etc., have had a very negative impact on the creek. So we moved from a healthy creek about 200 years ago to an increasingly unhealthy creek because of the way we've been living on the land. We also discovered that there has been a name change in the history of this creek. It was known as Kenosha, which means water of the walleye. Walleye would come up this creek and spawn. This creek's name was shifted to Plaster Creek in the mid-1800s because the first gypsum mine in the West Michigan area was right along the banks of Plaster Creek, right along the banks of Kenosha. And gypsum was mined and then ground into this fine powder that was used for plaster to build many of the early buildings here in Grand Rapids. And once the mine was set up, there was so much pollution into the creek that walleye stopped coming up the creek to spawn. As far as we know, walleye still don't come up Plaster Creek to spawn. We're hoping for that day when we can find a walleye in the creek. So we're working in that direction. So the name was changed to Plaster Creek, and that name change, I think, is really significant. Initially, it was known as a creek because of a living creature that resided in that creek, and that living creature helped to sustain the lives of people in a very holistic way. And then to name it Plaster Creek, it's named for a resource that was mined out of the banks of that creek. And that resource then, the mining of it contaminated the creek to the point where it can't support nearly as much life anymore. Today, Plaster Creek is known as the most polluted waterway in West Michigan. Oh, why is it so polluted? Mostly it's stormwater runoff. So stormwater runoff is the rain or snow melt that flows off surfaces like rooftops, streets, and parking lots because it can't soak into the ground anymore. We have replaced that lovely forest cover with landscapes that can't absorb nearly as much water. The water can't get into the ground, and then the trees were able to soak up a lot of stormwater when it would rain. A fact that I really like is stuck in my brain. I don't think I'll ever be able to get it out, but I was reading a paper where these scientists were trying to measure how much water does a tree take in from its roots on a daily basis and then transpire out through the leaves. So it'll open little stomates on the leaf surfaces to take carbon in, and water vapor goes out. And the estimates they came up with for a silver maple, a mature silver maple tree, was 500 gallons a day for one tree. All right? So picture a forest, and now picture a heavy rainstorm. All those trees are like straws, and they're sucking that water up, and they're putting it out into the air. And so that the local creeks are going to fluctuate very little, even with heavy rain, when you have a forested land cover. And now that forest gets replaced with landscapes like this, and we have all kinds of problems. The creek gets way too much water whenever it rains. We have flash flood events downstream where all that water collects, and those neighborhoods are much more subjected to flooding damage to their homes. And it can be a dangerous place just because of that flashiness of the stream. But also, what's in the water is concerning too. I want to walk you through this slide a second. This is some research that we did back in 2015, and we're trying to understand all the problems with this creek. So just let's look at the left-hand slide for a moment. That is a Petri dish, and it's a Petri dish where we collected a small sample of water from Plaster Creek, and it was at Paris Park, which is in the upper part of the watershed. And we put that little sample of water into a little solution called Coliscan, shook it up, and this Coliscan has some pigments so that when E. coli grows, it will take on that pigment. And then we can see the E. coli colonies that come out of that little bit of water that we collected from Plaster Creek. The E. coli will grow purple. There's other bacteria that grow red. Why E. coli? E. coli is an enteric bacteria. It means it grows in the guts of animals like you and I, as well as cows, as well as deer, geese. So in the guts of animals, there's E. coli. And that's typically good. It helps digest our food. But when the bacteria gets into bloodstreams, it can cause lots of problems. And so if you get a cut on your hand and E. coli gets in there, you might get an infection and need to put a little antibiotic ointment on there, that kind of thing. So it's a good bacteria in our guts. It's not good to have out in surface waters where it could come into contact with people and cause problems. The state of Michigan sets standards for E. coli levels in water, and their standard for safe swimming is 130 colonies per 100 mils of E. coli. On that left-hand side, with that sample we took on June 2 in 2015, the purple dots, you can see there's 2 up at the top, there's a couple others, and there's 1 off to the side. There's 5 E. coli colonies that came from that small sample of water. And when we did the math to standardize it to 100 mils, that comes out to 200 colonies of E. coli per 100 mils of water, which is above the state standards for safe swimming. So at Paris Park, kids should not go into the creek when the E. coli levels are that high. That's June 2. We had thunderstorms come through between June 2 and June 12, and we had a lot of stormwater runoff come into the creek. The same volume of water was collected at the same spot on June 12, and look at all the E. coli colonies. Right? That one took a lot longer to count, and that the number comes to 24,000 colonies per 100 mils. So you can see that this is a really serious public health matter, because this creek is carrying all kinds of E. coli after every rain event. So it's not only just the volume of water that's a problem, which it is, but it's also what's in the water. So learning about these things created a real cognitive dissonance in some of us faculty here. Cognitive dissonance is a fancy term that philosophers use a lot. It's when it feels like your talk is not consistent with your walk, where you believe something, but then you suddenly realize, wait a second, I'm not living out that belief the way I should. So we're having all these wonderful conversations here at Calvin about Reformed theology, creation care, being good stewards of God's creation, and how we learn about God from studying the creation, et cetera, et cetera. And then coming to the realization that most of Calvin's property is in a watershed that's drained by a creek that kids can't play in. That was the cognitive dissonance. And it really motivated some of us. We've got to do something. So some of the things that come out of this realization, how muted has God's glory become by the way Plaster Creek has been treated over the years? And when we contemplate God by considering Plaster Creek, how does God communicate to us from this really damaged creek? What are we learning about God? And how much better would that message be from the Creator if we had a healthy, thriving Plaster Creek? And then what can we do about this? So some of us got together and we're really motivated to try to do something, to make our talk align better with our walk. So we had a workshop, 3-day workshop, funded by the Calvin Center for Christian Scholarship, right here at Calvin, over in the Bunker Interpretive Center. We called it Creation Care on the Home Front. And we had some pastors, we had church members, community partners, Calvin faculty, staff, and students all come together for 3 days to really try to process this whole situation and really under the big question, what should we do? And out of those 3 days came this agreement to start a faith-based watershed group. Let's have it right here at Calvin. Let's call it Plaster Creek Stewards. There was an MLive story. We got everybody out to the creek a couple different times, and there was a picture of Mike Abma, who's the pastor over at Woodlawn. He was picking up some very disgusted-looking piece of trash, and he had gloves on because we had to be really safe. And he had this really wonderful look on his face of disgust, and it made the MLive. And then there was a local philanthropist who saw this and got very excited to see a faith-based group starting to do some environmental work. So anonymously, he sent us a $10,000 check, and that allowed us to hire our first project coordinator. Part-time, $10,000 doesn't go a long ways, but it was a wonderful boost to us. And we were super excited. We had lots of energy. We had this vision for what we wanted Plaster Creek Stewards to look like, and we started writing grant proposals to get some funding to do some really good things for the creek. And our first 9 grant proposals over 3 years were all rejected. And it was a real test of resilience. And it was also a time where we learned a lot about how to write a good grant proposal. And I look back at some of those early ones and I shudder a little bit. But we also during that time sort of started asking questions about, what should we do and what will we not be able to do? We can't do everything. And we decided to focus on 3 things that Andrea is going to talk a little bit more about in a moment. Let's focus on research, education, and outreach, and let's focus on restoration. The other thing that really happened during those first 3 years is we started out thinking we need to clean up a creek, right? We want to make this creek playable for kids. And it occurred to us that if we somehow were able to do that, magically snap our fingers and this creek was suddenly clean again, kids could play in it. If we didn't change the way people are living in the watershed, if we didn't change the relationship between people and the creek, then the creek's going to just get contaminated all over again. And so what we realize is we really need to focus on reconciling relationships between people and the creek. So this realization brought us into a very new and emerging field of ecology called reconciliation ecology. And I love the concept, and I love that term reconciliation because it means a lot to us as Christians. It actually was introduced by an ecologist at Arizona State University named Michael Rosenzweig. And just by his name, Rosenzweig, I'm sure he is of Jewish descent. So I suspect he has some appreciation for that term as well. But reconciliation ecology is inviting biodiversity back into human-dominated places where people live, work, and worship. encouraging the mutual coexistence of human and non-human communities. So this is an approach of doing human-dominated places different and better so that the rest of the creation can come back and join us in places where we live, worship, and work. And this concept of reconciliation, which I've thought a lot about, it means to bring together two things that were previously separated. So people and the rest of creation used to be in sync. They used to get along. And then for some reason they were separated, right? Now what we want to do is bring them back again. Restore harmony, which in my mind means shalom, this beautiful big picture of integration. And to make amends and to live better together. Reconciliation ecology is all about moving into a more hopeful future where all creatures can thrive together, including people. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Andrea, and she's going to tell you more about some of the specific things that we've been doing.
Thanks. All right. Here we go. Dave's teaching is always just like really big ideas, and I always learn so much. I'm going to show you a little bit more about how these big ideas are happening in tangible, everyday, visual ways that you can see. So real quick, here's our mission statement that we've settled into, at least for now, that we're seeking to reconcile relationships between the people and the natural world by restoring health to the Plaster Creek watershed. We know we can't do it all, but this is the work that's in front of us. I have a video to show you. A student here at Calvin worked with his group last year in a video class and said he wanted to do a video about Plaster Creek stewards. So it's pretty fun. Dave and Haley are both featured in it pretty well. But I think it's a nice summary, and it gives you a little break between listening to us talk. So bear with me a second while I cue it up.
The first time I saw Plaster Creek was shortly after my family moved back here to Grand Rapids and when I started teaching at Calvin. And I found this trail off of Eastern Avenue that went down by Plaster Creek. Right away, my first impression was that here's another one, this creek is not very safe and I don't want my kids playing in it. And yeah, it's clearly got some problems.
The biggest issue in the Plaster Creek watershed is that there is non-point source pollution in the form of stormwater runoff. So a watershed, I feel like a lot of people don't know what it is. It's an area of land that when rain falls on it and it has to go somewhere and it can't soak in, it carries whatever is on those surfaces with it, and all that water ends up in the same point.
Plaster Creek Stewards is a faith-based watershed initiative of Calvin University.
Our little projects everywhere are little stormwater sponges that soak up water right where it is before it goes into storm drains and then would carry pollution into the creek.
We seldom recognize how vital a healthy environment is to allowing people to thrive. We started by thinking that we need to restore this creek. But if we didn't change anyone's behavior in the watershed, the creek would get contaminated all over again really fast.
So education is a really important aspect of what we do to create lasting change in the watershed that we want to see. We do that with kids of all ages to get them out in the field and combine education with action to understand the impact that they can have for the better and empower them to keep doing that.
We also realize that we need to have people in the watershed meet each other and get to care about each other. When we develop a project at their site, at their mosque, at their community center that bring these diverse people together, there's this tangible, visual reminder that we are all humans and we all share this place and we all care about it and we all would like to see it improved. When people don't get along, the land suffers. And when people get along, the land will be beautiful.
Heavy form, yeah. Help all the time. Yeah, that's right. All right. So real quickly, Plaster Creek Stewards, we talked about that initiative of Calvin University, our connection here. We realized quickly that watershed work it's just, there's so much to do, right? And at the university, we're a pretty small group. This is a pretty small watershed. We have so much work to do, obviously, but we have to keep a scope that we can manage. So as part of a university, we can do research. We have amazing faculty here who lead the way in that. We can do education. We're an educational institution, obviously. And we can do restoration work. We have this amazing structure here at Calvin. And I'll talk about our greenhouse pretty soon. We have vehicles and we have student power. And that's kind of where it started. So we can actually do restoration work, putting our research and education into action. So real quick, the research is increasing our understanding of how best to help the creek. When Dave started with his research projects and his students 20 years ago, they were just sampling the water and discovering what was in the water. Well, we know a lot of what's in the water. We're still doing some of that, but now we're also studying the practices that we've been putting in, the rain gardens, the tree plants, the various things, the parking lot sizes. We're researching a lot of the things outside of the creek to better understand how to help the creek. So our research has morphed over the years. The beautiful thing is that everyone can do research. So we can get students, in elementary school, all the way through adults out in the field learning about the creek. And it's a great way to start building a relationship with the creek. Education is all about building awareness and concern and care. Again, our education spans all ages, so we're out there with preschoolers and folks bring their little kids to events to learn about the creek. And then, we're learners of all ages can start learning about Plaster Creek and start developing that care. We have a couple key programs I'll touch on again at the end that go with education. And then again, that restoration work, it feels so good to take action when you've learned about a problem. You've learned that you're even potentially part of the problem, right? Because you live or work or worship in a place and this place isn't healthy. And when you learn that there's something that you can do about it and take action, that's a very empowering and a great thing. So yeah, our restoration work, again, I'll get into more detail on this, but it all starts with native plants. Native plants are plants that are here in Michigan, or they're in a place, they weren't brought in from other countries. They've been growing for generations. Think about like maple trees and oak trees or goldenrod or asters, ferns, some that you're really familiar with. But there are lots and lots of native plants, and this is definitely Dave's specialty. And we collect seeds from these native plants and we grow them in our greenhouse. But native plants are foundational to our work because they have these deep root structures. The picture that's up here are prairie plants. So these are kind of the extreme examples, but some of those roots are 17 feet deep in this picture. And if you look on the far left, over here, this is lawn grass. For comparison, and the roots on lawn grass are shallow, like 4 to 5 inches deep at the most. And because of that, lawn grass requires a lot of care, right? There's a lot of fertilizers, watering, mowing, a lot of tending. Whereas in comparison, these native plants, their deep roots help them to survive dry, hot summers like we've just had, cold winters, even getting munched by deer and rabbits. Once those root systems are established, they can weather all those things because that's what they're used to. This is the environment that they've been in for thousands of years. So they're excellent in our application because we want something that soaks up a lot of storm water. We want something that's going to hold soil in place, and those root structures are amazing for that. And as an amazing added benefit, everything above ground feeds pollinators and birds, which again are part of that watershed community that we're sharing. So when we can increase biodiversity by bringing back native plants and using them in city landscapes, urban landscapes, that is just increasing the health and the vitality for our watershed. Here's a couple of quick pictures of our greenhouse. This is on Lake Drive, so part of Calvin's property. We share the greenhouse with the Ecosystem Preserve, and they have a native plant sale each spring and fall for residents and the community. We grow our plants in the exact same greenhouse, but we use ours for larger projects that we're installing in the watershed. But yeah, lots of volunteers come and help here to grow these plants. And this area is also a hub for a lot of our restoration projects. This is where our trucks and trailers are kept and our tools are kept. This is where our students gather every morning and leave at the end of every day. This is the hub of our work here. So I wanted to share a bit about the work that's happening here on Calvin's campus. Like Dave mentioned, we want to walk the talk, and that starts with our own house first. So our own place here at Calvin and some of the work that's been happening. And again, I'll probably not hit those three buckets, but education, research, and restoration will come up over and over, as you'll see here. So starting with professor-led scholarship and learning, our professors really lead the way. We've had 10 faculty that have led their own research in their areas, and it spans from history through chemistry and biology and GIS, or mapping, if you will. So lots of different areas. Like Dave said, water is life, and everyone needs life, right? So no matter which discipline you're in, there's an application to Plaster Creek. It's a wonderful learning classroom. Professors find ways to work Plaster Creek into their course projects, introducing students, like even in a photography class, like the first picture, to native plants and their roots and how those native plant roots help Plaster Creek. And then the students did a photography project around that. Obviously, there's outdoor labs that happen with classes, field trips, and then service learning projects. There's a English professor who takes her students to the greenhouse to transplant native plants and learn about Plaster Creek stewards. And one more really important piece of scholarship I wanted to mention was that Dave and Gail wrote a book. I have a few copies here, in case anyone's interested in looking at it or reading more about Plaster Creek and just everything that we're talking about today. It's an excellent book. The story of Plaster Creek, my thing is the story of Plaster Creek is not unique. Almost every urban stream in America has a story very similar to ours, but this is our story. So it has lots of history to this area and to this creek specifically, but the lessons in this book can be applied to creeks throughout the nation, probably the world and beyond. But so the professors kind of kick it off, but the students pick it up. So students do their own research and learning. Some of this, I listed a few of the recent projects across the bottom there, and you can see they cover a variety of disciplines, from chemistry, business, biology, sociology, and engineering. Again, just to emphasize the fact that Plaster Creek is so versatile and the issues are so diverse that they can be worked on from all different angles. Students also work with us during the summer. The picture in the middle here of the guys with a little field mouse in a plastic bag. The field mouse will be returned to the wild very quickly here, but they were doing a floodplain diversity study, so looking at mammals, birds, and insects in restored floodplains compared to floodplains that haven't been restored and are still experiencing a lot of erosion and disruption. That's an example of some students doing research this summer, and that happens every summer. We have generally 10 to 15 students working with us throughout the summer. And then usually some interns during the school year, during the academic year as well. Sometimes they're finishing their research and writing for a publication. Sometimes they're doing a new project as well. And then we have other students who may not be doing a research project in a lab or with real specific measurements, but they want to learn hands-on skills for ecological restoration. So they join our restoration crew, and they get real-world experience dealing with problem solving, but also that real-world experience of working with residents and folks in the neighborhoods and in the world, other engineers who work for the city or landscape architects. It's a chance for them to grow those people skills within the community as well. And I guess one side that Dave talked about, that reconciling relationships within folks or between people in the watershed, I guess we didn't hit it real hard. But we realized that if people don't know each other and care about each other within the watershed, that feeling of caring for the land isn't the same either. If you know someone who lives downstream from you and is experiencing flooding, and you're a part of a community that's causing flooding, there's a little bit more of a connect. So we do feel like building relationships within all our work is key. So we invest time into relationships. We invest time into coming back and visiting homeowners, visiting sites after our projects are done, and continuing that relationship on. This is important because it's taking action together fights that eco-climate anxiety. It combats hopelessness. A lot of our students will talk about the heaviness of climate change and what it's going to look like for them and their kids. And like I said earlier, taking action helps. Having that community to share that with helps. And then with our students here on campus, this can look in the summer like potlucks together. We meet, of course, for work, but then we meet together and we celebrate food from different cultures. You know, students bring food from, comfort food from home, and they share that as a group. We have like all salad night. We have a themed night. We've had a theme night before of like zoo food, and they get creative and have fun with it, and it just builds this sense of community. That's just one example there. And of course, then there's the tangible things on campus too. If all we did was talk about our problems with Plaster Creek and never did anything here on campus to slow down stormwater and treat it, then that would be rather hypocritical. So I have just a couple examples here. There are many, what'd you say, 17? 14 sites on the main campus here that help soak up stormwater and slow it before it reaches the creek so it can cool down. This is one of our favorite ones. It's actually across East Beltline over by the Prince Conference Center. We call it Lot 16, Bioswale, and it's a pretty big section of the parking lot was crumbling, and they gave us permission to put in a large bioswale here. So this area here that's under construction, all the water from the parking lot sheet flows down into this basin here, which was then planted with native plants and has become like a little ecosystem wetland on its own in a parking lot. It's beautiful. It just took a little bit of rain, and there were already frogs showing up and insects and birds checking it out, and it's over time it's become quite a rich location. This is another rain garden that's right here on campus outside of the Spoolhof Center in the Commons. Another example, a meadow planting after the Heminga Hall construction was finished last year. There's a large area that was damaged from construction, just from the dirt moving and whatnot, and that's been replanted into a native plant meadow. So this is a group of Student Senate students that were very excited about it, and they helped fund it themselves. I should say Student Senate has funded gardens on campus for the past 5 years. So the work that's been done on campus has been Student Senate led throughout, which is really exciting. And some more students planting it from the community. So shifting from the work that's happening on campus to the community, Plaster Creek Stewards is very much a community-facing initiative out of Calvin. I feel like we work with community partners every single day, whether they're from municipalities, the city of Grand Rapids, or nonprofits, other watershed organizations like ourselves that are working in Grand Rapids. We're partnering with neighborhood associations. It's quite diverse work with the community, but it's really important to hearing their voice and not just waltzing in and saying, we know what's best for the creek, and here it is, you know. We recognize that this is their home, right? Their watershed, their locations, and we go in with an attitude of humility and listening to what their issues are with the environment, with water, with traffic or safety concerns, and then we think about ways that we can work together to address those for the creek. So a few examples. This is Leisure Creek Condo Association. So it's near Dutton in our upstream watershed area. And here's
look fine. There you go. Perfect. Thank you. So y'all stream somebody else's in the other location?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
neighbors. So once it's replanted, it's starting to look, it looks kind of park-like here, kind of a traditional, but it's not done. We planted lots and lots of trees in the floodplain and added lots of native plants, so it's already growing up beautifully. We're already noticing the water slowing down, clarifying. It's a beautiful project. Further downstream in our urban neighborhoods here in southeast Grand Rapids, we have very different soil types that are sandy soil. The upstream soils are very heavy clay and don't absorb water quickly. That kind of shunts it to the creek. But our downstream urban soils are very sandy and can take in lots of water. So these areas tend to be lots of concrete and roads and parking lots. So anytime we can get water to shift to these rain gardens, these basins that are excavated and then planted with native plants, they absorb all that water from the parking lots and the streets quickly, and they allows it to run through the ground and cool and get cleaned and filtered. So here's an example of what we call a curb cut rain garden. And you can kind of tell there the basin shape that's been excavated. Once the plants are established, the curb will actually be cut so that the water from the road gutter runs right into the garden instead of into the storm drain. We've installed over 160 of these, I believe, to this point. That's kind of a rough number, but it's been a wonderful addition, we hope, to southeast Grand Rapids. If you've driven around, maybe you've seen a couple of them here and there. That's what they look like when they're busy at work, taking in all that storm water. Yeah. And last what I want to point out is a parking lot retrofit. This is one that we just did this summer at Grace Episcopal Church. This is on a waterway we called Silver Drain or Silver Creek Drain. It runs into Plaster Creek down by Roosevelt Park at the end, but it goes underground far away at Hall and Plymouth here at Grace Episcopal Church. It runs underground for about 5 miles before it reaches the creek, and over the course of that full 5 miles, it only gets water from storm drains. So the water only reaches it when it runs off of streets. So you can imagine the quality of water leaving Silver Creek Drain is quite poor. So it was really a great opportunity for us to be able to put in a rain garden near the top, and it addresses all the runoff from this entire parking lot. You might be able to see it's just this band right here. So they lost about 8 parking spaces that they were happy to give up. And this entire area now, it was a hot, dry summer, so I apologize if the picture looks a little brown, but all of those plants were well watered, and they will look like the Lot 16 picture by next year. And again, I want to emphasize that students help make this happen. Our student team got to do the sediment trap. They did all the planting this summer. Yeah, we're a huge help. Oh, I guess I did have one other application here I wanted to point out was residential landscapes is another way. We don't just do big projects, we do small projects with people that just want native plants in their yard, whether it's in a rain garden or a landscape. And our student crew and our staff are happy to jump in and help folks with this. And again, the native plants that come for all these projects start, just to remind you, back in our greenhouse. So we grew over 500 species of native plants that are, they all have different preferences. So when we go out to a site and it's shady and cool, or shady and dry, excuse me, we know that we have plants in the greenhouse that prefer shady and dry conditions. Or if we are in a hot, sunny, wet location, we know plants that will thrive in that location. Or a location that's next to the road and they need to have short plants. We have a list of plants that will work for that site too. So it's a great fit and a great experience for students to be able to start to see how these restoration needs to pair with an already developed community. That map that Dave had up earlier of all of the development that's happened in the watershed. We can't reverse that development. We're not going to replace cities with wetlands, but we can put a little wetland next to a parking lot or a space that acts like a wetland and that it absorbs the water and filters it. So again, we prioritize community out in our community as well. So I wanted to share about two specific programs that we have with our community. The first one is Green Team. These are high school students that come to us each summer. Some of them, it's their first job. It's their first experience applying for a job and being interviewed. And we form two teams, so they're each 3 weeks long. The students are paid for their time, and they get to learn all about watershed restoration. They collect seeds for plants. They grow the plants. They use the plants in their gardens. They maintain gardens that were planted years ago. They just get this full-rounded experience. They get to visit another watershed where they get to snorkel with trout and get to imagine what it's like to have a stream that's fishable and swimmable that they can interact with. I'll also add, they come from usually about 8 different schools within the watershed, so they're meeting students from different backgrounds, different lived experiences, and really growing their awareness of what the world is like in different perspectives. So it's a really rich 6 weeks of our summer, and honestly, it's exhausting, but it also keeps us motivated to keep going and get back to it each year. Project Greener is an adult version of that high school experience. We knew it couldn't be exactly like high school because adults can't take 3 weeks out of their jobs. So we made a class that's basically 9 sessions long, and it walks them through a lot of our education. They go deep learning about native plants and these green projects. They learn about community engagement and about the history of the watershed from an indigenous perspective, and also about environmental justice and how downstream communities experience a brunt of the pollution and the air pollution, water pollution, land pollution. And they integrate all of these things in the end, and they complete their own project. So we give them a $500 stipend to do something with. So instead of us doing 10 projects, we work with 10 folks and they do 10 projects, and then they keep doing projects, because once they learn about this, it just keeps going, keeps rolling. So I think that's the end of my little spiel.
I'll just bring this to a close, and then we can do some question time. We always, whenever we give a presentation, we leave the audience with what are some things that you can do, as you've learned some new things today, and we're not going to let you guys off the hook. So we encourage all of you to learn about your own place and do what you can to help care for it. I know some of you personally, I know some of you have been wonderful supporters of Plaster Creek Stewards, so we're really grateful if Plaster Creek Watershed is part of your place. But wherever you live, just really get to know your neighbors and invest in that place and help to make it a better place. Join in this hopeful work of reconciliation ecology, of bringing people and non-human creation back together again. It is Wonderful work and joyful work. If you'd like, sign up for our newsletter. We have a newsletter that comes out 3 times a year, and we have some materials down here in the front. You can leave your name and contact info if that's something you'd like to do. And also, gifts make what we do possible. So any gifts that could be directed our way, we'll be super grateful for. So we like this little quote at the bottom: let's become those who tend and keep God's good earth. And then I just wanted to leave with some takeaways. As I was reflecting after putting this talk together with Andrea, what are some things that I really wanted you all to know? And I wanted you to know that this Plaster Creek Stewards work is head work, it's body work, and it's heart work. Our staff are so amazing, and I love being around them. Each of the staff members could be making a lot more money in other roles, but they're in this work because this really connects to their heart and to their sense of what is good work to do. So, and it's hard work, right? We were just out planting trees yesterday, and I woke up this morning and my back was a little more sore than it normally is. So, I mean, this is physical labor, and it's hard, and we get dirty and sweaty and all that sort of thing. So it's not an easy route, but it can be deeply, deeply rewarding. We are working to reconcile people with creation and also people with people, as Andrea was mentioning. That's a new realization that's come to us, is that if people in the upper part of the watershed can get along and get to know people in the lower part, they're much more likely to change their behaviors in the upper part so they don't have as negative an impact on those in the lower part of the watershed. I also just love this picture. This is a picture of a rain garden that we put in at a mosque. And so here in this, we have partnered with 2 different mosques in the watershed. So we have Christians getting to know their Muslim neighbors. We all share the same watershed. We all have common interests. And so that's a picture of Christians and Muslims and people who don't identify with any sort of faith background coming together to do this work as one group. And also, I'd say PCS is a wellspring. That's a quote, a term that John Calvin uses a lot. So I'm circling back on my start with John Calvin. He uses this word wellspring of God's grace, wellspring of God's goodness. And I would say PCS is a wellspring of hope, joy, and beauty as we do our work. And there we go. This is some contact info and a final picture. So thank you so much for your attention and for coming today.
Okay, now comes the interactive part. So we've got a few minutes now for questions of Dave and Andrea and their team that's with us. So Ashley will be here with a microphone in the back. There we go. And maybe we can have the house lights up on the stage here, if you don't mind. That would be amazing. And then we'll grab your questions. And just wait for the microphone to get to you, because our friends who are watching online, they can't hear unless you speak into the mic. So I think we've got our first question.
Has your relationships with farmers and industry changed their actions?
That's a great question. I don't know that I have an example. I've met with a couple farmers over time, but that hasn't shifted a lot. A lot of the farming area in our upstream has actually been shifting over to housing. And maybe if you're from Dutton, you could speak to that for us too. But that's a shift I've seen. We have partners that do work with farmers a lot, and we often lean into that connection. But I'll say we have work to do there yet. With industries, kind of the same. We've actually been working with a professor here at Calvin and some others to think about calculating, and maybe it's kind of a heady thing, but calculating the value of Plaster Creek for the industries in the area, and then working with them to think about, if Plaster Creek is offering them this resource, how are you contributing to that? But yeah, that's a great question. Right off the bat, thank you. You stumped me.
I'll just say too that the agricultural community is a really difficult one for us to connect with. There's a fair bit of sentiment in agricultural rural areas, sort of suspicion with science, suspicion. Calvin is seen as a pretty liberal area in some circles, And Andrea emphasized how important it is for us when we go into communities to lead by listening and to be humble. And we've learned that lesson over the years. And so it has been challenging to make inroads in some of those agricultural communities because of some of the political mindset and other ways of thinking about one another. So we have some good work to do up there. With some of the businesses in the watershed, we do host, many businesses will have service days for their employees. And so we'll host a business where they come out and they do some work with us for a day. Meyer Gardens is in the watershed, and Meyer Gardens has been a wonderful partner with us. So they're in the furthest north part of the watershed, so the water drains to the south there and then around into Plaster Creek. So very good question, and we have lots of good work to do yet.
Okay, in the back.
As a member of Trout Unlimited, what you've described the last hour sounds almost identical to the work that they do. I'm wondering, have you been in contact with them or similar groups for cross-fertilization?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Trout Unlimited is like one of my favorite orgs to work with. They're fantastic. In fact, the river snorkeling that I was talking about with the green team is in partnership with Trout Unlimited up in the Rogue River. Trout Unlimited used to have their own green team that partnered with ours, and so we worked really closely then. Theirs has since disbanded, but they still host us every summer to come up to the Rogue River. I also work with their staff to maintain or install and maintain some monitoring that we have on Plaster Creek to look at chloride levels and temperature and whatnot. Jacob Lemon from Trout Unlimited helped me with that. And we would love to continue looking at how to grow that. In fact, I was just emailing this weekend with one of their members and we'll keep dreaming of that. But I would love to have like a trout school, like fly fishing and learning about trout in Plaster Creek. I don't know that we have a very good trout fishery at this point, or whatever it's called. We're kind of too warm of water for that, so we don't attract a lot of the attention that like Rogue River and stuff gets. But yeah, great question. Thank you.
So obviously the Plaster Creek watershed encompasses many different municipalities, townships, whatnot. Are you getting good cooperation from the government entities throughout the watershed?
Yeah, we have 9 different jurisdictions that overlap with the watershed, so townships and municipalities. And Grand Rapids has been a wonderful group to work with. So they've been a terrific partner. Some of the outlying townships have been a little more challenging. And as you can imagine, some of those outlying townships that don't have a lot of revenue are trying to attract development. And they want to make development as easy as possible. And so their focus is a little different than our focus. So, but other townships have been better. And so it's a real mixed bag. But you have to be pretty sophisticated in terms of knowing who you're talking to about what and what's going to make them motivated to become involved. So it's a pretty complicated landscape.
I'll add to that governments are made up of, all of us get to choose our leaders and speak to our leaders. So if any of you are, live in the Plaster Creek watershed and want to encourage Kentwood, Grand Rapids, Wyoming, or your local townships to do, use more native plants and work with contractors to add native plants to landscapes. That's a great place to start. And a lot of them are already moving that direction, so it'll be encouraging to them to hear from you.
All right, we got time for a couple more here.
When I was teaching 4th grade in Northwest Indiana, Purdue University had a program where they would come into the classroom and educate children on, our 4th graders, especially on watersheds and keeping water clean and, all the things that were growing in the water. It was very interesting, but we never went on a field trip. And I saw young children there on a field trip. Do you go into classrooms at all?
We kind of, like I said, we listen carefully to what the community needs, and we try to meet them where they're at. So there's some schools that it's nearly impossible for them to take field trips. So then, yeah, we go there and we bring as much as we can with us to help them learn about Plaster Creek and land use. But then any time that we can combine learning and action, we're all about that. So yeah, there's other schools that field trips are part of their gig, and that's easy for them. So then we have them out to the greenhouse to learn about native plants. We have them out to the floodplain to plant plants, or we show up at their schoolyard and plant trees. So yeah, whichever, we work with whatever they need, where they're at, and try to cultivate whatever activities fit them. Yeah.
Good.
One observation or comment in the farming agricultural area. The Nature Conservancy Agency has been involved there, especially over in the Thumb area of Michigan, but they are experienced and would be a good resource. And then two quick questions. One, how is the native plant sale advertised so we would know when it is happening? And secondly, are there other churches that are seeking your guidance and labor investment to help them develop their property in a positive way?
So the native plant sale is advertised online. I think that I don't know that much because the native plant sale is done by the Calvin Ecosystem Preserve. So Plaster Creek Stewards doesn't have a native plant sale per se. We will sell to some landscapers who buy more high volume plants and trees and things like that. But the native plant sale, which happens, I think it's the first Saturday every May, second Saturday every May. And so that's, I think most of the advertising goes online through social media. In terms of the churches, we have been really excited to be part of a group called Sacred Grounds. This is a National Wildlife Federation initiative, and they came to West Michigan and heard about Plaster Creek Stewards' work as a faith-based watershed group, and they set up a pilot project here in the watershed. So we have now worked with, I think, 7 or 8 cohorts of churches. So we've done projects at over 40 houses of worship here in Grand Rapids. And that's been a wonderful project. And they come in with their own funding, so we can fund these gardens or pollinator gardens, whatever, at these local houses of worship. Yeah, thanks.
All right, got one here. Good.
I'd be interested to know, you made a very strategic decision back in, I guess, 2009 to go with the reconciliation approach with getting people to appreciate the relationship between humans and God's creation. I'm wondering, number one, do you feel you're farther ahead having made that decision? And number two, I'm wondering if you think that this approach could perhaps be scaled up to the national level, where there appears to be somewhat of a gap between the relationship between humans and God's creation.
Yeah, wonderful questions. Thanks so much. Yeah, so I think this approach is exactly the right approach. We don't have a side-by-side comparison, so, take it for what it's worth. But I feel like so many good things have come from taking this approach of focusing on relationships. And one thing that I definitely have seen is the deeper appreciation for the way indigenous people lived in the land. And I think that's absolutely right as well, because they lived in the land for centuries without destroying it. And that's what we're trying to figure out how to do now, to live on this planet in ways that we don't destroy it. So in some ways, we're becoming reconciled with the indigenous people who were here before we were. And that's been extremely meaningful interaction and realization. And then also, I think, with young people, so showing young people that the church is still relevant, because we do care deeply about the creation and about their future. And so I've seen this, in some ways, it's kind of like a wonderful catch for young people who may be disillusioned by the institutional church and maybe have lost interest in becoming involved in church because they haven't seen it as so relevant to their lives. But we show them firsthand, and we give them opportunities to experience that. So I think that that's been really wonderful as well. seeing those relationships flourish, and then seeing younger people. I call them children. It shows how old I am. College students. I hope there's none here. But no, seeing young people really sort of get re-energized again for faith and for their own Christian journey. So, was there another question there too? Did I ask? Oh, scale it up. You know, in the book that Gail Hefner is the co-founder of Plaster Creek Stewards, and she's retired now, but Gail and I wrote this book, Reconciliation in the Michigan Watershed, and that's a big point in the book, is that, as Andrea said, there's nothing all that special about Plaster Creek. There's lots of messed up urban creeks all over our country, and we can other places can take this same approach, and they are. Our book has been used as a book study by several other watershed groups, and we have helped to spawn watershed groups locally as well, both the Cold Brook Watershed Group and the Buck Creek Watershed Group. So absolutely, what we're doing here can be scaled up.
All right, take the last question here from Peter in the front.
I was just curious, where are you getting most of your support? Or do you get any support from the government, federal or state?
I'll take this one. And I'm just going to give Dave permission if he needs to get to class.
Yeah,
you,
I actually
you
have
can.
to go to class, so I think I'm going to exit right now. We have two other staff members who can talk to you afterwards.
Yeah, and I can take this question.
Yeah, let's give Dave a round. So thank you very much. Thank you.
So we have a pretty diverse funding stream. Calvin gives us a lot of support, just our offices, our IT help, right? Like all those things that Calvin supports us with. But then we have to write for grants if we want federal funding or state funding. And we do currently have one federal funded grant that is putting in rain gardens and parking lot retrofit and lots of tree planting, and that is through Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding. So anytime you get a chance to support that funding, please continue to encourage them to keep investing in the Great Lakes, because it's obviously this invaluable source of fresh water that is special through the whole world, but that funding does trickle down to communities like Plaster Creek. So that is our one federal funded project. And it runs out next summer. The other, we've had lots of state funding for like those big floodplain restorations, those kind of projects. And then our other sources of funding are through donations, especially for like Green Team, some of these specific programs. And then our boots on the ground projects with people like houses of worship or schools, or a lot of residents who hire our students to come in and install rainscapes. Does that answer the question for you? Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Well, special thanks to Andrea for hanging around. We're going to wrap this formal part up. I'm sure Andrea and then Betty and Haley, who are here as well, will be happy to talk afterward. I know you've got some materials down front, and if you want to sign up for the newsletter, I'm sure we can do that.
I have just a clipboard here with a piece of paper. If you're interested in getting a newsletter from us periodically about the updates and what we're working on, invitations to events, you're welcome to sign up. It's pretty easy if you have an email. And then I do have a couple cards and information, and if you want to look at the books or anything like that.
Yeah. So thank you to everyone who was here today and those watching online. We're grateful to learn more about Plaster Creek Stewards, and hopefully this is the beginning of many more conversations about the great work that's happening here. So thank you all again. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's fun. Oh, good.